The cleaning cart squeaked its way down the empty hallway as Sam pushed it through the research station's quiet corridors. 3 years of night shifts had taught him which wheels needed oil and which sections of flooring made the most noise. He preferred the silence of the graveyard hours when most beings were asleep and the station's usual chaos settled into peaceful stillness. Sam Rodriguez had never planned to become a space janitor. Back on Earth, he'd been studying to become a teacher before his family needed money, and this job offered steady pay with decent benefits. The work wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and he'd grown to appreciate the solitude and the chance to see how different species lived when they thought no one was watching. Tonight felt different somehow. The air recyclers hummed with an odd rhythm, and twice he'd noticed doors that should have been locked standing slightly open. Sam had learned to trust his instincts during his time on Harmony Point. The research station hosted dozens of alien species, and understanding their habits had become second nature to him. The xenobiology wing stretched ahead, its walls lined with observation windows and equipment that Sam only half understood. He'd cleaned these rooms hundreds of times, carefully working around delicate instruments and sample containers that probably cost more than his annual salary. The scientists who worked here during day shifts were friendly enough, though most barely noticed the human who emptied their trash and mopped their floors. As Sam rounded the corner near Lab 7, he heard something unusual. A soft chirping sound, almost like a bird, but with an electronic quality that seemed wrong. He stopped pushing his cart and listened carefully. The sound came again, weak and desperate, from somewhere behind the massive spectrometer that dominated the lab's far corner. Sam tried the lab door and found it unlocked, which was unusual. The xenobiology teams were normally strict about security protocols. He stepped inside, his footsteps muffled by the thick rubber flooring designed to absorb vibrations from sensitive equipment. The chirping grew louder as he approached the spectrometer. Something had definitely gone wrong here. Equipment panels hung open and several cables lay scattered across the floor. It looked like someone had been working late and left in a hurry, but regulations required all labs to be secured before personnel departed. Behind the large machine, Sam discovered the source of the sounds. A piece of heavy equipment had fallen at an angle, creating a triangular space against the wall. Trapped in that space was the most beautiful creature Sam had ever seen. The being was no larger than a house cat, with scales that shifted from deep blue to silver as it moved. 4 legs ended in delicate claws, and 2 small wings pressed tight against its back. The creature's head was distinctly reptilian, but its amber eyes held an intelligence that seemed almost human. Those eyes looked up at Sam with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. A baby dragon. Sam had seen pictures in the station's cultural databases, but meeting one in person was entirely different. The little creature was obviously young, probably equivalent to a human toddler based on its proportions and behavior. It had somehow gotten trapped when the equipment fell, and from the looks of the scattered tools nearby, it had been trying to free itself for some time. Sam knelt down slowly, keeping his movements gentle and non-threatening. The dragon stopped chirping and watched him with those remarkable eyes. He could see a small cut on one of its front legs where it had scraped against the metal edges while struggling to escape. "Hey there, little one," Sam whispered, extending his hand palm up in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Let's get you out of there." The dragon tilted its head, studying Sam's face with surprising intensity. It made a sound that almost seemed like an attempt at speech, but the syllables came out broken and unclear. Sam had heard enough alien languages during his time on the station to recognize the difference between random noise and attempted communication. Working carefully, Sam began moving the fallen equipment. The pieces were heavier than they looked, and he had to use a tool from his cart to lever them into new positions. Throughout the process, the little dragon watched every movement with intelligent attention. When Sam finally created an opening large enough for escape, the dragon didn't immediately flee. Instead, it approached Sam cautiously, sniffing at his outstretched fingers. Its nose was warm against his skin, and Sam felt a strange sense of connection with this small, vulnerable creature. The dragon tried to speak again, producing a series of sounds that might have been words in some language Sam didn't recognize. The effort seemed to frustrate the little being, and it looked up at Sam with an expression of disappointment that was heartbreakingly human in its clarity. Sam had seen that same look on his nephew's face back on Earth. David had struggled with speech development as a toddler, and the family had spent months working with therapists to help him communicate. The dragon's attempts at vocalization reminded Sam strongly of those early sessions. "You're trying to talk, aren't you?" Sam said softly. "The words just aren't coming out right." The dragon's eyes widened at Sam's tone, and it nodded in a way that seemed intentional rather than coincidental. It pointed at its own throat with one small claw, then made the broken sounds again, clearly frustrated by its inability to communicate properly. Sam's heart went out to the creature. Whatever species it belonged to, this little one was obviously intelligent and desperately wanted to express itself. The parallels to his nephew's early struggles were impossible to ignore. He spent the next few minutes checking the dragon for injuries, relieved to find only minor scrapes that had already stopped bleeding. The creature tolerated his gentle examination with remarkable patience, almost as if it understood he was trying to help. As Sam prepared to leave, the dragon made a sound that was clearer than its previous attempts. Thank, it managed, the words difficult but recognizable. Sam felt a surge of excitement. This wasn't random noise. The little being was actually trying to speak in Standard Galactic, the common language used throughout the station. "You're welcome," Sam replied, speaking slowly and clearly. "You're very smart, aren't you?" The dragon bobbed its head enthusiastically, then attempted to repeat Sam's words. The sounds came out garbled, but the intent was unmistakable. Here was a young mind eager to communicate but struggling with the mechanics of speech itself. Sam made a decision that would change both their lives. He couldn't just walk away from a creature so obviously in need of help, especially when he might actually be able to provide that help. His experience with his nephew had taught him patience and techniques that might work across species barriers. "I'll come back tomorrow night," he promised the dragon. "We'll work on those words together." The little creature's eyes sparkled with understanding and hope as Sam gathered his cleaning supplies and prepared to finish his rounds. Lab 7 had become Sam's favorite stop during his nightly rounds. For 2 weeks now, he'd been meeting with the little dragon he'd started calling Pip, a nickname that came from the creature's habit of making short, sharp sounds when excited. Each night brought small victories that filled Sam with a satisfaction he'd never experienced in his regular janitorial duties. Pip had claimed a corner of the lab as his territory, somehow managing to avoid the day-shift scientists who used the space for their research. Sam had no idea how the dragon remained hidden during daylight hours, but he suspected the creature was far more clever than its size suggested. The lab's storage areas offered plenty of hiding spots for someone small and determined. Tonight, Sam arrived with a small container of fruit pieces from the station cafeteria. He'd noticed Pip showing interest in the sweet smells from his lunch leftovers, and experimentation had revealed that the dragon particularly enjoyed anything with citrus flavors. The little creature now looked forward to these treats as much as their speech sessions. "Good evening, Pip," Sam said as he entered the lab, keeping his voice soft and steady. He'd learned that sudden loud noises startled the dragon, though Pip had grown much more comfortable around him over the past 2 weeks. Pip emerged from behind the spectrometer with obvious excitement, his scales shifting through their beautiful color spectrum as he approached. The dragon had mastered a handful of basic words, though pronunciation remained challenging. "Sam!" he managed, the name coming out clearer than it had the previous night. Sam felt the familiar warm glow of pride that came with witnessing progress. "That's right, very good. How are you feeling today?" The question was part of their routine now. Sam would ask simple questions and encourage Pip to respond with whatever words he could manage. The dragon's vocabulary was growing steadily, and more importantly, his confidence was building along with his abilities. "Good," Pip replied, then paused and concentrated hard. "Feel it good, hungry." Sam smiled and opened his container of fruit pieces. "I brought oranges tonight." "Can you say orange?" Pip's eyes lit up at the sight of the food, but he dutifully focused on the lesson first. Orange. The second attempt came out much clearer, and Pip practically bounced with pride at his success. As Pip enjoyed his treat, Sam pulled out a small tablet he'd borrowed from the station's educational resources. He'd loaded it with basic language learning programs designed for young children, though he'd had to adapt the content for his unique student. The visual aids seemed to help Pip connect sounds with meanings more effectively. "Let's practice colors tonight," Sam suggested, showing Pip a series of simple pictures. "What color is this?" Pip studied the image of a red ball, His head tilted in concentration. "Red," he said after a moment, the word coming out with only a slight slur. They worked through several colors, with Pip successfully identifying most of them. His memory impressed Sam constantly. The dragon rarely forgot a word once he'd learned it properly, and he seemed to understand grammar concepts that should have been beyond his apparent age level. As they practiced, Sam couldn't help but think about his nephew David back on Earth. David's speech therapy had taken months of professional intervention, yet here he was helping an alien child make similar progress in just weeks. The techniques that worked with human children seemed remarkably effective with Pip, suggesting some universal principles about language learning. "Sam," Pip said suddenly, setting down the tablet to look directly at his teacher. Why help me?" The question caught Sam off guard. Pip's sentence structure was still simple, but the meaning behind the words revealed a depth of thought that sometimes surprised. "Sam," the dragon was asking, something profound about motivation and kindness. Across species boundaries, Sam considered his answer carefully. "Because everyone deserves help when they need it. And because you're working so hard to learn. That makes me happy." Pip nodded slowly, processing the concept. "Happy," he repeated. I feel happy too." Their sessions had begun to attract attention, though Sam tried to keep their meetings secret. Twice this week he'd heard footsteps in the corridor outside Lab 7 during their lessons. Station security conducted random patrols, and Sam worried that his unauthorized use of the research facility would eventually be discovered. More concerning were the announcements he'd been hearing over the station's communication system. Someone was looking for a missing person, or rather a missing someone. The descriptions were vague, but they mentioned a young family member who had disappeared from the diplomatic quarters. Sam had a growing suspicion that Pip might be connected to these searches. The dragon never spoke about his origins or family. When Sam asked gentle questions about where he came from or who he belonged to, Pip would grow quiet and change the subject. It was clear the topic caused distress, though Sam couldn't determine whether that was due to trauma, confusion, or something else entirely. "Pip," Sam said carefully during a break in their lesson, "do you remember your family? Your parents?" The dragon's scales shifted to darker blues. A color pattern Sam had learned indicated sadness or anxiety. "No talk family," Pip whispered, his hard-won pronunciation skills faltering under emotional stress. Family no want Pip. Sam's heart ached at the pain in those simple words. Whatever Pip's story was, it involved rejection or abandonment by his own kind. The dragon clearly believed his family didn't want him, though Sam suspected the reality might be more complicated. "I want you here," Sam said firmly. "You're my friend, and friends help each other." Pip's eyes brightened at the word friend, and Sam realized it had become one of the dragon's favorite words. "Friend," Pip repeated happily. "Sam is good friend." As their session continued, Sam noticed Pip attempting more complex sentences. The dragon was beginning to understand tense and could express simple past and future concepts. His questions were becoming more sophisticated, too, showing curiosity about Sam's life and the world beyond their small corner of the research station. "Where Sam live?" Pip asked while they practiced reading simple words on the tablet. "I have a room in the crew quarters," Sam explained. "It's small but comfortable. Someday I'll go back to Earth. That's where humans come from. What about you? Do you know where your people live?" Pip's expression grew thoughtful. "Far place, big buildings. Many like Pip, but..." He struggled with the words to explain something complex. "Pip different. Cannot speak like others." This was the most Pip had ever revealed about his background, and Sam sensed he was getting closer to understanding the dragon's situation. It sounded like Pip came from a place where others of his species lived, but his speech difficulties had marked him as different in some negative way. "Different isn't bad," Sam assured him. "You're learning to speak beautifully. Your family would be proud if they could hear you now." Pip looked uncertain, but he seemed to draw strength from Sam's confidence. "Practice more?" he asked hopefully. As they continued their lesson, Sam made a mental note to research dragon-like species in the station's databases. If Pip was connected to one of the diplomatic delegations, there might be information available that could help Sam understand the situation better. He was beginning to suspect that helping Pip communicate might be about more than simple language learning. It might be about giving a rejected, child the skills he needed to find his place in the world. The night passed quickly as always, with Pip's enthusiasm making even the most repetitive exercises enjoyable. By the time Sam needed to finish his rounds, the dragon had mastered 3 new words and was successfully forming longer sentences. "Tomorrow night?" Pip asked as Sam prepared to leave, a question that had become their standard farewell. "Tomorrow night," Sam confirmed, giving the dragon a gentle pat on the head. "Keep practicing while I'm gone." As Sam pushed his cart down the corridor, he felt the satisfaction that came from meaningful work. Whatever consequences his unauthorized teaching sessions might bring, he knew he was making a real difference in one small life. That was worth any risk the future might hold. The shadows in the xenobiology wing had eyes tonight, though Sam remained unaware as he began his usual evening lesson with Pip. For 3 nights now, Counselor Vera had positioned herself in the darkened observation booth overlooking Lab 7, watching the impossible scene unfold below. Her youngling was alive. Not just alive, but thriving in ways that defied everything she'd been told by the finest minds of her species. The small dragon she observed bore little resemblance to the silent, withdrawn child she'd lost weeks ago, during the chaos of a station-wide emergency drill. This version of her son spoke words, expressed joy, and interacted with genuine enthusiasm. Vera's 4 hearts ached as she listened to the halting but determined voice she'd never thought she would hear. "Sam, I learned new word today," Pip announced proudly as the human janitor entered the lab. "Beautiful. Scales are beautiful." The human smiled with genuine warmth. "That's wonderful, Pip. Can you use it in a sentence?" Pip concentrated, his scales shifting through the color patterns that indicated deep thought. Sam has beautiful heart." Vera nearly gave away her position with an involuntary intake of breath. The concept her son had just expressed required understanding of metaphor and emotional abstraction that Drakmari specialist had insisted was impossible for a youngling with his condition. Yet here he was, not only grasping the idea but applying it with touching sincerity. The Drakmari had concluded long ago that younglings born without telepathic abilities were fundamentally limited in their cognitive development. The handful of children born with Pip's condition throughout their history had been cared for but never expected to achieve full communication or complex thought. Most lived their lives in gentle isolation, surrounded by family love, but unable to participate fully in Drakmari society. Pip's condition had been discovered shortly after hatching, when he failed to respond to the telepathic bonding that normally occurred between parent and child. Months of attempting to establish mental contact had yielded nothing but silence. The specialists had eventually concluded that without the telepathic foundation that formed the basis of all Drakmari learning, Pip would never develop beyond the most basic level of intelligence. Watching her son now, Vera realized how fundamentally wrong those specialists had been. The human, Sam, she had learned his name from listening to their interactions, was employing teaching methods that seemed almost primitive by Drakmari standards. No advanced telepathic enhancement, no neural interface technology, no sophisticated learning algorithms, just patience, repetition, and something the Drakmari had somehow overlooked in their technical approach to education: genuine emotional connection. "Let's work on telling stories tonight," Sam suggested, settling cross-legged on the floor beside Pip. "Can you tell me about something that made you happy today?" Pip's eyes brightened, and he began to speak in the careful, measured way that indicated he was organizing complex thoughts into words. "Today I watched through window, saw a big ship landing. Ship had many colors like rainbow after storm. Made me think of home, but not sad thinking. Happy thinking because now I have words to say what I see." Vera's breath caught again. Pip was describing the arrival of a Centauri diplomatic vessel that had docked that afternoon. But more than that, he was expressing nuanced emotions about memory and growth that demonstrated sophisticated self-awareness. He was comparing his current abilities to his past limitations and finding joy in his progress. Through the observation window, she watched Sam's face light up with pride. "That's beautiful, Pip. You're becoming quite the storyteller. Do you know what storytelling means in human culture?" Pip shook his head, clearly eager to learn. "Stories are how we share our experiences with others. They help us understand different ways of seeing the world. When you tell me about the colorful ship, you're sharing your unique way of seeing beauty with me." The concept seemed to resonate deeply with Pip, His scales shifted to the warm, golden pattern that indicated profound contentment, a coloration Vera hadn't seen from him since he was newly hatched. As the lesson continued, Vera found herself studying the human as much as her son. Sam possessed no obvious qualifications for teaching, no advanced degrees in xenopsychology or interspecies communication. His methods were intuitive rather than scientific, based on empathy rather than expertise. Yet he was achieving results that teams of Drakmari, specialists with centuries of combined experience, had declared impossible. The human's approach seemed to center on treating Pip as a complete individual whose thoughts and feelings mattered, rather than as a damaged being to be fixed. He celebrated small victories, showed genuine interest in Pip's observations about the world, and never displayed the subtle pity that had characterized most interactions her son had experienced with Drakmari adults. Pip was responding to this treatment by blossoming in ways Vera had never dared to hope for. His vocabulary had expanded dramatically, but more importantly, his confidence and sense of self-worth were growing daily. He was developing into the intelligent, articulate individual she'd always suspected might exist beneath his communication barriers. "Pip," Sam said during a quiet moment in their lesson, "have you ever wondered about your family? Do you think they might be looking for you?" The question sent a spike of anxiety through Vera. She had been searching for her son every day since his disappearance, coordinating with station security and following up on every possible lead. The entire Drakmari delegation had remained on the station far longer than originally planned, hoping against hope for some sign of his whereabouts. Pip's scales shifted to darker patterns as he considered the question. Maybe they look, but maybe they happy Pip is gone. Pip was problem for them. Could not speak right, could not connect minds like others. Vera's four hearts clenched with guilt and grief. Her son believed his family was better off without him, that his communication difficulties made him a burden rather than a beloved child. The attempts to help him fit into Drakmari society had somehow convinced him that he was fundamentally unwanted. "I don't think that's true," Sam said gently. "Parents love their children even when communication is difficult. Sometimes the problem isn't with the child, but with finding the right way to connect. Your family probably misses you very much." Pip looked skeptical but seemed to draw some comfort from Sam's certainty. "How, Sam, know?" "Because I can see how special you are. You're kind, intelligent, and eager to learn. Any family would be proud to have you as their son." The word son sent another jolt through Vera. The human had somehow intuited Pip's gender and his relationship to his missing family. Despite never having been told these details, Sam's understanding of her child seemed to operate on a level that transcended species barriers. As the lesson wound down, Vera made a decision that would change everything. For weeks she had been content to observe from the shadows, afraid that revealing herself would disrupt the miraculous progress her son was making. But tonight had shown her that Sam's influence on Pip extended beyond simple language instruction. The human was helping her son develop self-worth and confidence that would serve him throughout his life. She owed this remarkable being an explanation, and more importantly, her son deserved to know that his family had never stopped loving him or searching for him. Vera waited until Sam was preparing to leave before making her move. She descended from the observation booth with the silent grace that came naturally to her species, positioning herself in the corridor outside Lab 7. Her scales were set to their most formal pattern, dark blues and silvers that indicated both high status and respectful approach. The human emerged from the lab, pushing his cleaning cart with the casual efficiency of long practice. He was humming softly to himself, clearly pleased with the evening's progress. When he looked up and saw her waiting in the corridor, he froze with an expression of shock and what might have been fear. Vera realized how she must appear to him, a fully grown Drakmari nearly twice his height, blocking his path in an otherwise empty corridor. She had intended to project calm authority, but she could see that the human might interpret her presence as threatening. "Please," she said in standard Galactic, her voice carefully modulated to avoid alarming him further. "I mean no harm. We need to speak about the youngling you have been teaching." Sam's face went through a complex series of expressions: surprise, worry, protectiveness, and finally a kind of resigned determination. "You're Pip's mother," he said, and it wasn't a question. Vera felt a surge of admiration for this human who had somehow deduced her identity and relationship to Pip without any formal introduction. "I am Counselor Vera of the Drakmari delegation. The youngling you call Pip is my son, Prince Keel. I have been searching for him for 23 days. The revelation hit Sam visibly, and she could see him processing the implications. He had been harboring not just any lost child, but the heir to one of the most prominent Drakmari noble houses. The potential diplomatic consequences of his unauthorized interactions with Pip could be severe. Instead of apologizing or making excuses, however, Sam straightened his shoulders and met her gaze directly. "He's been learning to speak," the human said simply. "He's incredibly intelligent and eager to communicate. I couldn't just leave him struggling alone." In that moment, Vera understood why her son had responded so powerfully to this unremarkable custodial worker. Sam possessed something that all the Drakmari specialists had lacked: the simple conviction that every being deserved help when they needed it, regardless of the personal cost or social conventions. "I know," Vera said softly, her voice thick with emotions she had held back for weeks. "I have been watching. You have given my son something I thought was impossible, a voice to share his thoughts with the world." The conversation that followed would reshape both their understanding of what was possible when different species chose to help rather than merely coexist. But for now, they simply stood in the corridor, two parents united by their love for an extraordinary child who had finally found his voice. The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Sam stood frozen beside his cleaning cart, while the imposing figure of Counselor Vera seemed to fill the entire corridor with her presence. Her scales rippled with patterns he'd never seen before, and her 4 amber eyes held depths of emotion that transcended species barriers. "You have been watching us," Sam said finally, his voice steady despite the circumstances. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement of fact delivered with the same calm patience he used during his lessons with Pip. Vera's head dipped in what might have been a nod. "For 3 nights I have observed from the monitoring station above Lab 7. I needed to understand what was happening to my son before I intervened." The word son hung heavy in the air between them. Sam thought about all the times Pip had mentioned family with such pain in his voice, believing himself unwanted and abandoned. The reality seemed far more complex than either of them had imagined. "He thinks you don't want him," Sam said quietly. "He believes his inability to communicate properly made him a burden to his family." Pain flickered across Vera's features, her scales shifting to darker hues that Sam instinctively recognized as distress. "The fault is ours, not his. We approached his condition with all our traditional methods and declared him unreachable when those methods failed. We never considered that the problem might be with our techniques rather than with Keel himself." Keel. So that was Pip's real name. Sam filed the information away, though he suspected the little dragon would always be Pip to him, regardless of his formal title or royal status. "He's not unreachable," Sam said firmly. "He's one of the most intelligent beings I've ever met. He just needed someone to meet him where he was instead of expecting him to adapt to methods that didn't work for his mind." Vera studied Sam with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Her 4 eyes seemed to be cataloging every detail of his appearance and manner, as if trying to solve some complex puzzle. "You're a maintenance worker," she observed, though there was no condescension in her tone. "No advanced education in xenopsychology or interspecies communication. No formal training in language instruction. Yet you achieved in weeks what our finest specialists insisted was impossible." Sam shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. "I helped my nephew learn to talk when he had difficulties. Some things work across species, I guess. Patience, consistency. Treating him like his thoughts and feelings matter." "Treating him like his thoughts and feelings matter," Vera repeated slowly, as if testing the concept. Such a simple idea, yet it never occurred to our specialists. They focused on fixing what they perceived as broken, rather than nurturing what was already whole. The conversation was interrupted by a soft sound from within Lab 7. Pip had apparently heard voices in the corridor and was investigating. His small head appeared around the doorframe, and his expression transformed from curiosity to shock when he saw the 2 adults facing each other. "Sam?" Pip's voice carried uncertainty and fear. "What happening? Who is Big Dragon?" The moment stretched painfully as mother and son looked at each other across weeks of separation and misunderstanding. Vera's scales shifted through a complex pattern of emotions, while Pip remained frozen in the doorway. clearly recognizing something familiar but unable to process what he was seeing. Sam made the decision to bridge the gap between them. "Pip, this is Counselor Vera. She's been looking for you for a very long time." Pip's eyes widened and he stepped fully into the corridor, his small form dwarfed by the adults around him. Looking for Pip, but why look for Broken Dragon? The words hit Vera like physical blows. Her son had internalized the idea that he was fundamentally damaged, that his communication difficulties made him unworthy of love or attention. The specialists who had tried to help him had somehow convinced him that he was the problem rather than their methods. "You are not broken," Vera said, her voice thick with emotion she could no longer contain. "You are my beloved son, and I have searched for you every day since you disappeared. The entire delegation has remained on this station because we refused to leave without you." Pip looked confused, his scales cycling through patterns that indicated deep uncertainty. But Pip cannot mind speak, cannot connect like proper Drakmari. Specialists said Pip is limited, will never be full person. Sam felt anger rise in his chest at the casual cruelty of those words, even delivered innocently by a child who had believed them. "Pip, you are a full person. You have thoughts and feelings and ideas that matter. The specialists were wrong about what you could achieve." "Demonstration?" Pip said suddenly, looking between Sam and his mother. "Pip, show mother what learned." Without waiting for permission, Pip launched into one of the storytelling exercises Sam had taught him. He described his daily observations of the station's activities, his growing understanding of different species' customs, and his excitement about learning new words. His pronunciation was clear, his grammar increasingly sophisticated, and his emotional expression nuanced and genuine. As Pip spoke, Vera's expression transformed from grief to amazement to something approaching awe. Her son wasn't just communicating. He was demonstrating complex analytical thinking, emotional intelligence, and creative expression that exceeded what many adult Drakmari achieved through traditional telepathic development. "The purple beings from Sector 5 always walk in groups of 3, Pip explained enthusiastically. "But today one walked alone and its color was darker. I think maybe it was sad about something. Made me want to help, but I stay hidden like Sam teaches me." The observation revealed not just language skills but empathy, pattern recognition, and social awareness. Pip had been quietly studying the station's inhabitants and developing sophisticated understanding of their behaviors and emotions. When Pip finished his impromptu presentation, he looked hopefully at his mother. "Is good speaking?" Pip learning much from Sam. Vera's response came not in words but in the deep harmonic sound that Drakmari made when overwhelmed with pride and joy. The sound resonated through the corridor and Pip's scales immediately brightened to their happiest golden patterns. "It is beautiful speaking," Vera managed when she could find her voice again. "You have become everything I hoped you could be and more than I dared to dream." Sam watched the reunion with mixed emotions. Joy at seeing Pip reconnected with his family, but also a growing awareness that his role in the little dragon's life was probably coming to an end. Pip had a real family, a royal heritage and responsibilities that extended far beyond their quiet lessons in Lab 7. "Sam teach Pip good," the young dragon said proudly, apparently unconscious of the adult's more complex emotions. "Sam is best teacher in all galaxy. Make broken dragon into speaking dragon." "You were never broken," Sam said firmly. "You just needed someone to listen to what you were trying to say instead of expecting you to say it in a particular way." Vera turned to Sam with an expression that seemed to hold new understanding. "You speak of communication as if it should adapt to the individual, rather than forcing the individual to adapt to predetermined methods." Sam nodded. "Every mind works differently. Some learn through telepathy, some through visual cues, some through repetition and practice. Pip learns through patience and emotional connection. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just different." The concept seemed revolutionary to Vera, though Sam couldn't understand why. To him, it was simple common sense that different beings might need different approaches to learning and communication. "Among my people," Vera explained slowly, "we have assumed for centuries that younglings who cannot develop telepathic abilities are fundamentally limited in their cognitive potential. Your success with Keel suggests that our assumptions have been catastrophically wrong." The implications of that realization seemed to stagger her. How many Drakmari children had been written off as lost causes when they simply needed different teaching methods? How many potential voices had been silenced by rigid adherence to traditional approaches? Sam help other young dragons too? Pip asked hopefully. Many young dragons need good teacher like Sam. The question hung in the air between them, pregnant with possibilities that none of them had previously considered. Sam's simple act of kindness toward one lost child might represent the key to helping an entire subset of Drakmari society that had been essentially abandoned by their own culture. Would you? Vera asked quietly. Would you consider sharing your methods with our specialists? Teaching them how to reach children like Keel? Sam looked down at Pip, who was watching the conversation with bright, intelligent eyes. The little dragon had come so far from the frightened, trapped creature Sam had discovered weeks ago. If helping him could lead to helping others like him, how could Sam say no? I'd be honored to try, Sam said simply. Every child deserves a chance to find their voice. 6 months later, Sam pushed his cleaning cart through the corridors of Harmony Point with the same steady rhythm he'd maintained for over 3 years. The station looked the same from the outside, but everything had changed in ways both subtle and profound. His official job description still read custodial engineer, but his actual duties had expanded to include something that had never appeared in any maintenance manual. The small classroom adjacent to the cultural center had become Sam's second home. 3 evenings a week after completing his regular cleaning duties, he worked with young beings from various species who struggled with traditional communication methods. The Drakmari delegation had funded the program, but word had spread throughout the galactic community, and parents from dozens of worlds now sought his help. Tonight's session included Keel, who still preferred to be called Pip during their informal lessons, along with a young Centauri, whose family had traveled halfway across the galaxy after hearing about Sam's methods. There was also a small crystalline being whose species communicated through harmonic resonance, but who had been born tone-deaf, and a mammalian child whose cognitive development patterns didn't match her species' educational norms. Teacher Sam, called out Zara, the Centauri youngling, her voice bright with excitement. I learned 3 new words in my family language today. Want to hear? Sam smiled as he settled into the circle they'd formed on the classroom floor. I'd love to hear them, Zara. Remember to speak slowly so everyone can understand. As Zara proudly demonstrated her progress, Sam reflected on how much had changed since that first night in Lab 7. The techniques that had worked with Pip were proving effective across species barriers, suggesting something universal about patience, respect, and emotional connection in the learning process. Keel had returned to his family and resumed his place in Drakmari society, but with a difference that rippled far beyond his personal development. The young prince had become an advocate for others like himself, using his newfound communication skills to challenge centuries of assumptions about cognitive development among his people. Sam, Keel said during a break in the lesson, my mother wants to know if you will speak at the education conference on Drakmari Prime next month. She says your methods are changing how we think about teaching all our children, not just those with special needs. The invitation represented something Sam had never expected when he first helped a frightened little dragon trapped behind lab equipment. His simple approach to communication had evolved into a movement that was transforming educational practices across multiple worlds. I'm still just a janitor who happened to help one student, Sam replied with his characteristic humility. I'm not sure I belong at a conference with professional educators and specialists, but that's exactly why you belong there, interjected Dr. Rivers, the human xenopsychologist who had started attending Sam's sessions to document his methods. Your outsider perspective allows you to see solutions that specialists miss because they're too invested in traditional approaches. Dr. Rivers had arrived on the station 2 months earlier as part of a research team studying Sam's educational techniques. She'd expected to find some sophisticated method that could be codified and replicated in academic settings. Instead, she'd discovered something more valuable and harder to quantify, the power of treating every student as an individual worthy of respect and patience. The academic community needs to understand that effective teaching isn't about advanced degrees or complex theories, Dr. Rivers continued. Sometimes it's about basic human decency and the belief that everyone has potential waiting to be unlocked. Sam turned his attention back to his students, who had moved on to a group storytelling exercise. Each child contributed a sentence to a collaborative tale, building on what the others had created. The activity required listening skills, creative thinking, and the confidence to contribute something meaningful to a group effort. The story they were telling tonight involved a space traveler who discovered a planet where every inhabitant spoke a different language. But they all learned to communicate through acts of kindness and shared experiences. Sam smiled at the parallel to his own situation. In many ways, his classroom had become that imaginary planet. After the session ended and the young students had been collected by their families, Sam remained behind to clean the classroom and prepare for the next day's lessons. The work felt different from his regular janitorial duties, though he couldn't articulate exactly why. Perhaps it was because this cleaning felt like preparation for something meaningful, rather than just maintenance. Keel had stayed behind as well, a habit he'd developed since returning to his family. The young dragon seemed to find comfort in these quiet moments with his first teacher, when they could simply talk without the formal structure of lessons. "Sam," Keel said thoughtfully, "do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't found me that night?" Sam paused in his sweeping to consider the question. "I think someone else would have helped you eventually. You're too determined and intelligent to give up on communication. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." Keel's scales shifted to the warm gold pattern that indicated contentment mixed with disagreement. But it was not just right place and time. It was right person, someone who saw potential instead of problems. The observation carried weight that went beyond their personal relationship. Over the months, Sam had come to understand that his approach to teaching wasn't revolutionary in its techniques, but in its fundamental assumptions. He started from the premise that every student was capable and worthy, then worked backward to find methods that unlocked their potential. "Prince Keel," Sam said, using the formal address that still felt strange on his tongue. "You're going to do great things for your people and others like you. The voice you've found will help other young dragons find theirs." Keel bobbed his head enthusiastically. "Already happening. 3 families on Homeworld are requesting teachers who use Sam methods. Mother says old specialists are learning new ways because of what we discovered together." The ripple effects continued to amaze Sam. What had begun as one janitor helping one lost child had evolved into a movement that was reshaping educational philosophy across multiple civilizations. The Drakmari weren't the only species reconsidering their assumptions about learning and cognitive development. As Sam prepared to leave the classroom, he found himself thinking about the invitation to speak at the Drakmari Education Conference. The idea of addressing a gathering of distinguished academics and policymakers still seemed surreal. But he was beginning to understand that his perspective might be valuable, precisely because it came from outside traditional educational structures. His communicator chimed with an incoming message. Sam expected it to be a routine work assignment, but instead found a message from the station commander requesting a meeting. The tone was formal but not concerning, suggesting some kind of administrative matter rather than disciplinary action. The next morning, Sam reported to the command center with the same mixture of curiosity and mild anxiety that had characterized most of his encounters with authority figures since his teaching activities began. Commander Hayes greeted him with a smile that immediately put him at ease. "Sam, I'll get straight to the point. The Galactic Education Council has submitted a formal request for you to serve as a cultural liaison, specializing in alternative learning methods. It's a significant position with a substantial increase in pay and status." Sam listened to the details of the offer with growing amazement. The position would allow him to travel between worlds, working with different species to develop inclusive educational approaches. It represented everything he'd never dared to dream about in terms of career advancement and meaningful work. "It's an incredible opportunity," Sam said when the commander finished explaining the offer. "But I need to ask, would I still be able to maintain my regular duties here on the station? My cleaning rounds, I mean." Commander Hayes looked puzzled by the question. "Sam, this is a chance to become one of the most influential educators in the galaxy. Why would you want to continue working as a janitor?" Sam considered how to explain something that he wasn't entirely sure he understood himself. "Because that's when I do my best thinking. When I'm cleaning and maintaining things, my mind processes everything I've learned during the day. Plus, I like the routine. It keeps me grounded." After a moment of reflection, Commander Hayes nodded. "I think I can arrange for you to maintain an honorary custodial position. You'd have access to continue your evening rounds when you're on station, even with your new responsibilities." That evening, Sam made his usual rounds with a sense of completion that felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. His cart squeaked along the familiar corridors, but now he saw the station differently. Instead of just a workplace, it had become the launching point for something that might change how the galaxy thought about education and communication. As he passed Lab 7, Sam paused to remember the night he'd discovered a small, frightened dragon trapped behind fallen equipment. That moment had seemed insignificant at the time, just one person helping another in a moment of need. Yet it had grown into something that was touching lives across multiple worlds. Keel's voice echoed in his memory. Someone who saw potential instead of problems. Perhaps that was humanity's greatest contribution to the galactic community, not advanced technology or superior firepower, but the simple belief that every being deserved a chance to reach their full potential. Sam completed his rounds and headed back to his quarters, satisfied with a night's work well done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight he was content to be exactly what he'd always been. A human who believed that small acts of kindness could change the world, one life at a time. The galaxy had taken notice of that belief, and Sam suspected that the ripples from one night's compassion were only just beginning to spread.